Let me backtrack a little bit. Like a long jumper or a pole vaulter, I'm going back to gain speed to come forward. As you correctly establish the context of this discussion, we are in a raging pandemic in which over 4 million people worldwide have died. Our largest trading and business market, the United States, over 600,000 people have died. In neighboring countries, we see what's happening. We see what's happening in Jamaica. We see what's happening in Trinidad and Tobago. We see what's even happening. A country that has a premier and well-celebrated medical system, who has provided the largest contingent of medical personnel worldwide. A country that has not sent soldiers to fight and to kill or to bomb, but they have sent soldiers of medicine. Cuba has the largest single contingent of medical personnel in the world. And we've seen what that pandemic is currently doing to Cuba, a country that is not a first world country, the only country in all of the third world outside of India. But India is a unique case because India is producing the vaccine under license, as its vaccines were developed in the world's most established colonial power, the United Kingdom. Whereas Cuba has developed its vaccine on its own medical knowledge and its own medical prowess. And we see what challenges that this pandemic has posed to Cuba. So context is always important when we have in discussions like these. Secondly, we have grown up in a world of mandatory vaccination. It is nothing new. The reason why you and I have not contracted polio, may never have contracted measles, or don't have rubella, or would not have shingles because you didn't develop smallpox, why we didn't die from tetanus, right? All of these things. And now, cervical cancer is preventable if you take a vaccine to prevent surgical cancer. So, and in our system, which we have long accepted, because we practice Western British parliamentary system of democracy, our jurisprudence is tied to that of the UK, and so on. So that's what we practice. We have free and fair elections, we have freedom of the media, and so on. Notwithstanding that, all of us, my generation and years, have grown up on mandatory vaccines because you could not have gone to school, to start infant school, right, without being vaccinated. Mandatory vaccine, let us understand what the term means. It does not mean that the commissioner of police, in conjunction with the minister of health, has a goon squad going around holding down people and giving them a vaccine. Mandatory vaccine does not mean that. Mandatory vaccine means that the state has set certain policy directives in which, in the interest of public health, if you don't take the vaccine, you are denied access to certain things. So under our existing mandatory vaccine, no child can be registered in any school, whether private or public, unless that child is inoculated. What does the term inoculation mean? Taking a vaccine for what is described as childhood diseases. So mandatory vaccines are nothing new. As a matter of fact, I'll go further to point out, and I'm slipping away for a moment to get my copy of the Grenada Constitution. It's here. I hope you can see it. The Grenada Constitution, in its fundamental provisions, in its fundamental rights and provisions, sets aside 5 of those rights, right? And I have them all ticked off here. Protection of right to personal property, right? And that is the fundamental right number 3. And it begins by saying, no person shall be deprived of his personal liberty, save as may be authorized by law in any of the following cases. And one of those exceptions is G, for the purpose of preventing the spread of an infectious and contagious disease. This is our fundamental law. And we got this at the time of independence, 1974. And this is a law that stands. Any law that contradicts this law, the law that's in contradiction falls, and this stands because this is fundamental. 5 of the provisions: protection from slavery and forced labor, right? Another provision, let me go through it again. That is protection from arbitrary search or entry, right? And that is protection number 7. And let me go again. Protection number 4. Sorry, protection number 10. So this is the fourth provision that has been affected or circumscribed or limited by that phrase that I just told you here. Protection of freedom of expression, which is protection number 10. And it says here, nothing contained or done under the authority of any law shall be held to be inconsistent with or in contravention of this section, to the extent that the law in question makes a provision, right, that it is reasonably required in the interest of defense, public safety, public order, public morality, or public health. So, I say this to say, we already have on our law books written many years ago a Public Health Act. And it is under the Public Health Act that the access to education through educational institutions are prescribed, that no child shall be admitted to any one of these institutions except that child is inoculated. So you go to sign up your 4-year-old in preschool or whatever it is, you bring your birth paper, you bring other IDs, and they tell you, where is your inoculation card? And if you don't have that inoculation card, the child cannot come to school, simply because it's a measure to protect public health and to protect people from a contagious disease. Yes? Now, so fast forward now to 2019, December, and where we are now in August of 2021. So we have this raging pandemic. We have already had 1 death, and unfortunately, that death is a personal friend of mine, Brother William John. He was a militant member of the Technical and Allied Workers Union, working in the National Water and Sewage Authority. His wife, Janet, became the chief shop steward in the St. Andrew branch of the union. Her sister worked in the secretariat that we had in the Grenville office. William was very close to me, right? So when it died, it's a death that hurt me and hit me because it was personal. I know of no one who has been killed by the vaccines that are available. I don't know if you know of any, but I'm certain you know of people who have died from this disease. So, look at what has happened as a result of the pandemic. Liat has, at several times throughout the life of Liat, since it started in 1973 or 1974, Liat has, at several times, visited the grave. It never went in, right? It has always been able to come back since its formation. What has sent Liat to the grave? COVID. What has happened as a result of that? 600 and something workers with over 200,000 years of service are now all home, including Grenada, that has 40 something workers, plus another 20 something who won a case against Liat, plus Captain Blackburn, a Grenadian, an outstanding pilot, worked for all of his working life with Liat, won a major case against Liat all the way up to the Privy Council. He has a ruling in his favor. He can't enforce it because Liat has shut its doors. Look at the number of hotels that are on the brink of going under. Look at what happened to St. George's University. For over 1 year, the university was not able to operate on island. I don't know if you're aware, but tied up to that university are properties and businesses. The banks are holding several billions of dollars in investment for properties they finance. And for more than 12 months, all of these properties are closed, empty. The banks are not being able to be paid. So we have a contagious situation in our financial system, which could lead to the collapse of the financial system and could further lead to the literal shutdown of the economy, with hundreds of workers, thousands of workers going home, right? Which would lead to a devaluation of the EC dollar, right? Which could mean that we will become like Guyana or Jamaica, where instead of 2.67 to the US dollar, we may require 40 EC dollars to the US dollar. Do you know what that would mean? So this pandemic is serious, in addition to which the government lost 50% of its revenue. The same government that has to pay police officers, have to pay teachers, have to pay nurses, have to provide medicines for the hospital, have to provide supplies for the hospital in a pandemic. Everybody is calling on the government for money. Busmen want an increase in a context where unemployment is about 30 or 40% of the economy right now, right? Busmen want a reduction in gas, which means they're not seeking that reduction from the oil company, they're seeking that reduction from government revenue. Because if government gives subsistence to them, government has to take it from the revenue, right? That it has to supply, it has to pay salaries with. Remember, 50% of the government revenue has gone. So I'm setting all of this out for us to understand. And let me make a further point. This government has not been given sufficient credit for the fact that it has kept Grenada safe. The death of Brother William John literally is an imported death, because William came from the States, he and his wife. They didn't come on a direct flight, they had to go through Miami, so they spent some time. So although he had a negative PCR test, in order to be qualified to the process of boarding the plane, and even though when he arrived here, he had another negative PCR test, he contracted that disease somewhere in flight. Yes? The government has kept Grenada safe. So we have had one death. Our total infected number of persons have not yet reached 200. For most of the time, it remained at 160, with no deaths and only 6 people hospitalized. The countries that were better than us were Dominica, St. Kitts, and I think BVI. Dominica had absolutely no deaths. And up to just a few weeks ago, maybe 14 days ago, they had only 86 infected people. In the twinkle of an eye, Dominica records its first death this week. It has 500 and something active cases that they have conducted 24,000 tests. Right? They now have 6 people facing death in the hospital. From a country that had no deaths and 86 or 7 cases, they now have 500 and something active cases. And they are currently tracing 2,300 and something persons whom they suspect. So there's a breakout in Dominica. The government has said in its medical wisdom, and let me take us point here. We have some of the finest Grenadian doctors that any country could have. We have a gentleman here, very modest, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Sean Charles. I serve with him on the committee because I have been on the COVID committee since its inception last year, right? And I have continued since. Dr. Sean Charles is our Dr. Anthony Fauci. He's a Cuban-trained Grenadian, but he did his epidemiological training, I believe it's in the UK or wherever it is he did it. This guy ought to be celebrated. Had I believed in colonial awards, I would have asked the government to give him a knighthood. And he is the key architect in keeping us safe. We said Trinidad say no carnival, Brazil say no carnival, Jamaica say no carnival, St. Vincent say no carnival, Barbados say no carnival. We have done the same thing, yet there were people on the media promoting carnival. And I have my beef with the GBN, and I will hold them responsible because they were indirectly promoting carnival by putting the people in the carnival mood. When you turn on to GBN in the morning, all you're hearing is a jab jab beat. So while the law, because this was passed by Parliament, so it's the law, right? They are also political activists who are encouraging the people to go to play carnival. Now Grenada has a breakout. And depending on what happens, this economy could go back into shutdown. I'm saying all of this to give you my response to the question of vaccination of workers. Because people are going to die. The Minister of Health had said so, and his political opponents are climbing all over him, but it's a fact. Medical science has developed a tool. First of all, they laid out measures which were used in 1918. Wear your mask to cover your nose and your mouth. Wash your hands constantly. Avoid rubbing your eyes or putting your digits in your nose. Stay 6 feet away from people. Avoid crowds. Right? And they even limit people going to church. That is a measure developed since 1918. It's nothing new. But no, modern science. In the same way as I'm able to speak to you now, which I couldn't do 15 years ago. In the same way as we were talking over this on the phone and I could see you, which we couldn't do. Right? In the same way as you can do surgery without having to open up, and you could do microscopic surgery. If you can do microscopic surgery and you could repair the valve in a man's heart without having to cut open his chest, why can't you develop a vaccine in short order? We are not living, this is not 1918. The world is in a different place. We are a knowledge-driven world. Man has a better understanding of nature and matter. Right? A private man could go out of space right now in an aircraft. Right? So there is a tool, and that tool is a vaccine. Now, I am saddened by the fact that my fraternity, from which I gave all of my working life, is not in the forefront of the call for workers to be vaccinated. Because workers will die. There is not a single ad on any television station. I have not seen a single march. If I was still in the trade union movement, right, I would have been visiting workplaces. I would be down on the factory floor. I will have an army of nurses with me, urging workers to get vaccinated. I would support the call for mandatory vaccine. And that's my position. I support mandatory vaccines. Because it is simple. If you don't do it, then all of us go down. Whether you like it or not, people are going to die. And those who are likely to die from this disease are the unvaccinated. So I understand. An employer has a duty. The law, the Constitution says you can do it. And quite frankly, I mean, had I my way, right, I would have issued the necessary instruments to ensure that it's mandatory vaccine. If you don't want to take it, nobody can force you to take it. Right? I think St. George's University has it right. They have it right. You don't want to take a vaccine, you're not coming into my place. I'm not firing you, but you're not going to be paid, and there are consequences which will flow. No, what I'm saying is not popular. I can tell you that before this program is finished, there will be trade unionists outside there fuming. Right? I went on a program and I said to them, you misled the workers in the pension issue, because we had laid out the framework of how that pension should be dealt with. And you know what they did to me? In my own union, they took a black cloth and put it over my photograph. So I expect a ton. But I am straightforward. Workers know me. And it is in their interest, because those workers who have taken the vaccine, if the economy closes down, they will be affected. I will not allow ignorance, because those who don't want to take the vaccine is driven by ignorance. I will not be a prisoner of ignorance. I will speak the truth. I will speak it forthright, and I will encourage you. I am a leader. I am not a panderer. There's a difference between a panderer and a leader. A panderer may occupy a leader's position, but he would not lead, because he will listen to what the crowd says and go with the crowd. I have never been that kind of person. I have never been that person, and at closing in on 70, I can't change. So I know I will get a ton of bricks coming at me. But the guys in the trade union movement know me. They know I am absolutely fearless. So it matters me not what they do. Whether they take down my picture in Tau, or they cover it with a black cloth, or they have a ceremonial funeral for me, it matters me not. Because that cannot wipe away my legacy. I speak truth to the workers, right? And I will tell the workers straight, you are being led by superstition and nonsense, and your life is at risk. Take the vaccine. And I will support employers, because under the law, the employer has a duty of care to provide a safe environment. I thought I've overextended my time, and I may have spoken too much. I'm not hearing you, you know.
Senator Humphrey, you have shared your position on this. I don't think there's anything else that we have to ask from you. It was very clear, and I do expect the windfall of rebuttals from this morning's comment. But I'm very happy that you shared it. You established context before we got into it. You stated your position, and I think now it is clear. I don't have to ask you anything, because I was going to ask you what's your position on the trade unions. What would be your advice to them? And that you answered. That you answered.
And remember, I was also the General Secretary of the Caribbean Congress of Labor.
Yes.
And I held it 2 consecutive terms without having to get a vote. And when I indicated that I was going to demit office, many of the unions in the Caribbean urged me to stay. But I said to them, look, I've run my part of the race. Yes,
hand over the baton.
I do not want to overspend my income. I have put the CCL on a sound footing. I got, together with David Messiah, 2-point-something million US grant from the European Development Fund. I moved the CCL from a bankrupt organization that did not have its own headquarters, that was squatting in a dingy room in one of the trade unions, to set up its new modern secretariat. I got all of the modern ITs and things set it. We had educational programs. We developed a website. We had a regional magazine. All of that I had set up and I left behind. So a black cloth or a pre-run funeral cannot tarnish my legacy. It can't tarnish my legacy. There is not a single industrial agreement in the Technical and Allied Workers Union that was not signed by me. Even those that are now signed since I left, there have been no changes to them other than a few % increases in wage. So that my fingerprint in terms of the life of the worker is very clear. I want to end on one statement, and that is I want to use the opportunity to elaborate on an incident which happened. And well, I won't say it's unfortunate, but it is malicious. And headline in the news that I would shut the GBN down. And I did make the point on Beyond the Headline that had I been chairman of the regulatory authority regulating media and all of that, I will pull a license. On Monday, so-called Carnival Monday morning, a prominent Grenadian citizen called me and asked me whether or not I was on the net or I was listening to GBN. I said, no, I was getting ready to come up to Parliament. And he said, please, Mr. President, tune on. I said, well, my computer is in my car and everything. He said, well, what about your phone? I said, well, yes, I have my phone. And he said, I'll send you the link. And he sent me a link. And I went on that link. It was the GBN Facebook page. Now, Mrs. Campbell is attempting to disown the GBN Facebook page. She cannot. The GBN Facebook page is an extension of the GBN. It carries the GBN logo. It interfaces with the worldwide net and millions of people in the world. It is a valid child of GBN. And it's not a child that became a child as a child. It's a valid child of GBN. It's an extension of GBN. And GBN was streaming to the world, the jab standoff and the bands of jab coming down. There's nothing wrong in that because they bring in news. But they were streaming live the obscenities, the bad words. And it was just not bad words. The bad words were being hauled at the country's prime minister and the country's prime minister mother. Live and raw. In the same way as you heard an attorney not too long ago. Live and raw bad words hurled at the prime minister and the prime minister's mother. You are in the media, my dear. Where are we going? And what Odette is trying to promote now, that I am anti-media. I have never had an issue with the media. I sued one media house and won. And then I turned around and gave the media house the money to fight a case where they lost. Yes? And it is all because of politics. But there are lines that have got to be drawn. And I repeat on your radio station that had I been chairman, and I'm not going to leave it there, you know. I am not going to leave it there. Mrs. Campbell cannot disown the GBN Facebook page, which is what she attempted to do in the newscast last night. And to present me as some demonic, anti-democratic, well, I had my anti-democratic days, everybody knew that. I was a main player in the revolution. It's not something I apologize about. That's my history. And I won't do like others and try to hide away from my history. People know me. And it's a history. I am proud to be in the same family of people like Fidel Castro and Nelson Mandela and so on. I spent 2.5 years in jail. I didn't spend it for rape, not theft, not burglary. I'm a revolutionary by nature. I'm a fighter for workers. When I got locked up, I was the first and only deputy president of the Senate who was locked up. In the Bury struggle, I was put in a police cell for serving, the workers know that. I didn't go there because I stole union funds. I went there in executing my defense, right, of the workers. And I'm proud of it. So when you try to frame me, and I called the lady, you know, I said, excuse me, I don't believe you are aware of what's happening with your station, but the buck stops with you. Right? And as I explained, within 5 minutes, the Facebook page stopped streaming the obscenities, but they started to say, GBN, Dive and Direct, not responsible for what is, a radio station is not responsible for its content. But where they get that bogus thing from? I have parliamentary privilege. I could say anything I want in parliament and not be sued. But if you, as a radio station, broadcast that outside, you are liable. So Mrs. Campbell cannot disown this baby. This baby belongs to the GBN fully, and it's not belonging by way of the law. A child is a child. This is a full-bred child consummated in a solid marriage, right? They are responsible, and I expect the appropriate authorities in Grenada to do something about it, right? This is my prime minister, okay? And I don't care whether the prime minister at the time was Mr. Tillman Thomas, or whether it was Eric Gary, or whether it was Morris Bishop, or whether it was George Brizan. You can't have a situation where to the world, people are singing obscenities about the sitting prime minister and his mother, and you are broadcasting it, and you want to excuse it on the basis that you have some contractor. Well, you are responsible for, if you hire a guy and the guy driving recklessly and he bunks somebody and kill them, your company is sued. You are liable. So let Ms. Campbell get this absolute, and this matter will not rest there, because the few of us who continue to be guardians at the gate have to speak up. The problem that we face in the world today is that too few people are speaking. Right? To make this point, it is a different radio media house. I will ask Ms. Campbell for an opportunity to clarify, and I don't know whether or not she would give it to me. She has editorial powers, and it's up to her. I will not gravel and crawl to get it, to be quite frank with you, right? But I repeat, had I been chairman of the authority, I would suspend the station immediately. Let them take me to court to get back that license and let us battle the issue there. And I repeat, I'll do it, but I don't sit on the board. I'm not the chairman. I do have those powers. But the powers that be ought to act. not only in their own self-interest, but to rescue the deterioration of standards in this country
I agree.
within the media institution.
I agree.
So I want to thank you again. Well, they have a new thing, Ms. I don't know what that means. Well, they say it doesn't identify whether you're married or not. So maybe I should just say, as the Americans, Oslin, but I am an old time. I grew up where everybody had a handler. No matter whether you were a gardener, a butcher, or so, everybody was either Mr., Miss, or Mrs. if you were married. That's how I grew up, and I can't change. It irks me when I had to call people by their first name, especially in a formal setting like this.
I know, that's
So
okay.
once again, thank you, and I hope I can catch up with you again sometime,
Y-
Courtney.